Well, first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to be doing the CPA Masterclass and to be here and telling you a little bit, I hope, about the importance of collaboration between elected parliamentarians, elected councillors and mayors. And my own background is that I've worked in the Commonwealth for many, many years. I've worked internationally. I'm now the Secretary General Emeritus of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, CLGF, which is in a way the sister organisation of the CPA. It brings together the mayors, brings together also ministers of local government from Parliament, so we do have a lot in common as sister organisations. And the thing I'm really excited about is the potential for collaboration. And why am I excited about this? Is because I think increasingly the local dimension has an importance, and I've met many MPs who are working with their councillors, working with their mayors, doing some really exciting things. And even at national level, I'll give an example. I was recently presenting evidence to the British House of Commons on how local government in the UK is implementing the new Sustainable Development Goals. And I had a tremendous reaction from MPs from all parties in the House of Commons. And that really demonstrated to me there's a huge potential of working together, even across party lines, between MPs, mayors and councillors. Well, the first thing to say really is that it's democratic local government in nearly all countries. Even small countries have democratically elected councillors and mayors. So democracy is a key feature in most Commonwealth countries, as it is indeed internationally. And that is guaranteed and supported by our Commonwealth heads of government. They endorse something called the Commonwealth Aberdeen Principles on Local Democracy and Good Governance, which were adopted in 2005 and have been incorporated in the Commonwealth Charter. So the basic idea of elected democratic local government is enshrined in the Commonwealth Charter. Local government, of course, also has many functions in terms of service delivery, in terms of providing basic services, and it's many countries, as I said, even some of the small island developing states in the Pacific and Caribbean have decentralized structures, have elected local government, have devolved powers to local government. So it's something that's very common throughout the Commonwealth. Well, basically, I think there's three areas. First of all, there's some very basic services. So, for example, refuse collection, garbage collection, dealing with water and sanitation in many cases, some really fundamental roles, which I think local government has pretty well everywhere. Secondly, there is, of course, more sophisticated service deliveries. I'm thinking of primary health care, and you had the example, even when there's a crisis or a disaster, as happened in Sierra Leone some years ago when we had the terrible Ebola crisis. Local government was very much involved with the health services, working with central government, working with development partners to combat that particular crisis. But providing basic health care, housing provision is often a local government responsibility. So a lot of core services, planning, of course, town and country planning, city planning, a lot of core issues at the local community level. And then increasingly, local governments attain what's called a developmental role, being an agent for development, working with the private sector, working with business to attract investment, jobs, promote tourism, for example. So playing a much broader role than just service delivery. And of course, that's linked to the fundamental democratic role of being the voice of the local community. Of course, being democratically elected, it represents the community, it represents the voice of the people at the local level. Well, we think it's a very major role. The 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development contained a number of provisions which directly relate to subnational government, to local government. So, for example, you've got SDG 11, which deals with inclusive, safe, coherent and sustainable cities and human settlements. So there's a direct issue of urbanization which is coming in. Also, you've got the issue of having actions at all levels of government. And somebody did a calculation which said that of all the, I think it's 169 targets of the development goals, over 2/3 have to be implemented or can only be effectively implemented at the local level, which brings us to the whole idea that the developmental level of local government, which I mentioned earlier, having a localizing of the goals and really ensuring that it's a bottom-up approach from the community rather than a top-down from development. Well, I've always had a lot of links through the CPA and other colleagues with parliamentarians when I've been travelling in Africa, the Caribbean, other parts of the Commonwealth. But really there's three very fundamental reasons. Number one, I think it's essential that local MPs know their local councillors, their local mayors, because they have a lot of interest in common, even if they're of different parties. And I know there's party political differences, but if you're representing a local constituency, you need to work with the local councillors in terms of development, in terms of attracting investments, jobs to your local communities. So you have to know your local structures, your local government as an elected parliamentarian. And secondly, I think there's a political parameter, because clearly many politicians, many parliamentarians rely on local activists for their election, for their campaigning. And it makes a lot of sense between elections, between parliaments, to work with your local activists, to work with the local mayor, to work with the local councillors in campaigning. I mean, you may have an issue around jobs, you may have an issue around the environment, you may have an issue maybe in some countries around conflict resolution and peace building, and that's best done in collaboration with your local councillor, with your local mayor. And then finally, I think, issue I mentioned a little bit earlier, economic development is so fundamental. And I think even if the mayor is from a different political party from the MP, it's critical the two collaborate in dealing with business, the private sector, and indeed central government in getting the best deal for your local area. I guess it's three sort of broad areas again. One is where the councillors and the MP are advocating and lobbying, if you like, for some benefit for their local community. It might be a new road, it might be some funding for the local community, it might be something to do with a particular problem like a disaster risk issue where some preparation has to be done. Basically, it's a question of ensuring a good deal from the central government. It might be lobbying the Minister of Finances, it might be lobbying the Minister of Local Government, it might be dealing with transport ministers. So it's really doing a joint campaign to ensure benefits to the local community. That's number one. Number two, I would say, is where you have legislation, where Parliament is dealing with local government legislation, and of course there's a lot of different local government legislation in most parliaments. It might be to do again with finances, might be to do with other areas, might be to do with local government powers, business rates, or all sorts of things. And here, of course, we have select committees, and many parliaments do have specialised select committees on local government. So it's a question of the Member of Parliament being on that select committee or talking to his colleagues or her colleagues on the committee, making sure that the right sort of legislation gets put forward. And I guess a third area would be working with the national umbrella body for local government. And again, in most Commonwealth countries, there is something called a local government association, which brings together councillors and local governments on a cross-party basis and acts as a partner to central government. And that's another area where the MPs would do well to work with their mayors and their local councillors at the national level. Definitely, I think there's lots of opportunities for international cooperation between councillors and parliamentarians. Perhaps the most obvious one is in respect, again, of the local area. And one interesting development is that many development partners, European Union, United Nations, UNDP, DFID, development partners, are now putting money in at the local level. And this is a relatively new development and strikes me a perfect case where the local MP and the local mayor or councillor can team up to lobby for local funds, for local projects, and for the benefit of the local community. So that's again a key issue. Secondly, there are a lot of international regional events where local government is playing a role, is represented, and of course now the reporting back on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, is a key function. And because the SDGs are supposed to be driven from the bottom up, not the top down, again this is an area where MPs and local councillors can come together and do things jointly. And then perhaps last but not least, the collaboration at the Commonwealth level itself between the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, my old organisation, and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is potentially very important. We do collaborate on a number of things already, for example, on work on supporting gender equality in the Commonwealth, on democracy, and on a whole range of other areas. So I think there's a lot of scope there for CPA and CLGF to come together and have a joint voice, which makes us stronger in unity. Let's go back to the first fundamentals, the constituency level. I think if I had a checklist is, do you know not just your mayor, but all your local councillors, regardless of party? Secondly, do you do joint campaigning with them on local issues, whether it's on inclusiveness, whether it's on environmental issues, campaigning on elections? Do you have a group of local activists who are working with you and your team? And having that strong local democracy is going to help you having a good campaign at the national level, at the constituency level. And then the second sphere, of course, is collaboration within government, within the national level, perhaps through parliamentary select committees on local government, perhaps through lobbying ministers to get funding for local projects, and indeed working with the national associations, the umbrella body of local government in the capitals. And then finally, as we've mentioned earlier, is the international collaboration, Commonwealth Local Government Forum, together with the CPA and other Commonwealth partners at the Commonwealth level, but also working with development partners to attract local funds, to get advocacy for getting the right representation for local government. And really, if I want to sum it up, the famous phrase, which I'm sure most parliamentarians know very well, famous phrase by the American politician Tip O'Neill, all politics is local.